The Saga of Ragnar Loðrok, Chapter 10. When that time had passed, when it had been agreed that Ragnar would go to the wedding in Uppsala, and he had not come, it seemed to King Einstein that it brought dishonor upon himself and his daughter, and then the friendship between the kings was ended. And when Eirik and Agnar, Ragnar's sons, heard that, they then plotted between themselves to go with as many troops as they might muster, that they might harry in Svitjoth. And then they gathered together many troops and readied their ships, and it seemed to them very important that all went well when the ship set forth. Then it happened that Agnar's ship shot off the launch rollers, and a man was in the way, and received thus his death. And they called that the reddening of the rollers. This seemed to them not to be a good beginning, but they seemed not to let that stand in the way of the journey. And when the troops were prepared, and they traveled with their troops to Svitjoth, there, when they came quickly to King Einstein's kingdom, they traveled across it with war shields. But the men of that land became aware of them, and went to Uppsala, and told King Einstein that they had come to land. And the king had a message sent in the form of an arrow throughout his kingdom, and thus gathered so many men together that it was wondrous. And then he traveled with them until he came to a forest, and there they set up their camp. He then had with him the cow Sibilja, and many were the sacrifices to her before she would travel. And when they were in the forest, King Einstein spoke. "I have news," he said, "that Ragnar's sons are on the field beside this forest. And it was said to me truly that they do not have a third of our troops. Now we shall arrange our hosts for battle, and a third of our troops shall go meet them first. And when they are so unflinching that they will think they have us in their power, immediately afterwards we shall come at them with all of our might. And the cow shall go before the troops, and it seems to me that they will not hold before her bellowing." And then it was so done. And as soon as the brothers saw King Einstein's troops, and they thought that their foes did not have a power greater than theirs, it did not occur to them that there might be more troops. And soon after, all the troops came from the forest, and the cow was set loose, and she leapt before the troops and went about fiercely. So great a din arose that the warriors who heard it fought among themselves, except for the two brothers holding their ground. But the evil creature struck many a men with their horns that day. But Ragnar's sons, though they were powerful in themselves, thought they might not stand against both the great crowd and the pagan sacrificial magic. However, they faced it unflinchingly, and guarded themselves well and bravely and with great renown. They, Eirik and Agnar, were at the front of the host that day, and often they went against the host of King Einstein. But then Agnar fell. Eirik saw this, and then bore himself most bodily, and did not care whether it came away or not. And when he was overborne by the great force and seized. And then Einstein declared that the battle should stop, and offered Eirik peace. He said, "I will lay this offer before you, that I will give you my daughter." Eirik replied and spoke this verse. "I will not hear an offer for my brother, nor buy the maid with rings from Einstein, who spoke the words of Agnar's death. My mother will not weep to see me stand, pierced through by a forest of spears. At last I choose to die." And then he said that he wanted men who had followed them to have peace to go wherever they wished. "And I wish to have as many spears as possible taken up, then have the spears set in the ground. And I wish to be lifted up upon them. There I would want to leave this life." Then King Einstein said that that would be done thus. And he asked, though he chose that which went worst with the both of them. Then the spears were set up, and Eirik spoke a verse. "I think that no king's son shall die on so dear a bed, a day meal to ravens, as I know my fate to be. The livid blood ties shall break both brothers' bodies, and soon shriek over us, though that be a bad reward." And then he went to where the spears were set up, and he took a ring off his hand, and cast it to those who followed him, and who had been given peace. And he commanded it to Oslog, and spoke verse. "Bear you my last words, you east-faring troops, that the slender maid, Oslog, is to have my rings. Then to the greatest of mothers, my mild stepmother, you may speak of me, her son, and to my glorious spear death." And then he was heaved upon the spears. Then he saw that the ravens flew, and again he spoke. "A sea mew rejoices over the head of my now wounded corpse. The wound hawk craves my unseeing eyes. I think if the raven strikes out my eyes, the wound hawk ill rewards the many times Echo has been given me his ill will." Then he gave up his life with great valor, and his messengers went home, and did not let up until they came to where Ragnar had residence. And then Ragnar's sons had not come home from raiding. They were there for 3 nights before they went to meet with Oslog. And when they came before Oslog in her high seat, they greeted her worthily. She received their greeting. She had one linen handkerchief upon her knee, and she had unloosed her hair, and she intended to comb it. Then she asked who they were, since she had not seen them before. He who had spoken on their behalf said they had been among the troops of Eric and Agnar, the sons of Ragnar. Then she spoke a verse. What is said by you, friends of the king? What news? Are the Swedes still in their land, or are otherwise driven out? I have heard that the Danes went out from the south, and the chief had bloody rollers. But since then I know nothing. He spoke a verse in reply. There is no need, woman, that we tell you of Thora's sons are dead. Cruel are the fates to your men. I know no other tale as heavy as this. Now we have come from hearing the news. The eagle flies over the corpse of the dead man. Then she asked how that had happened. And then he spoke the verse which Eric had spoken when he had sent her the ring. They said that she then let a tear fall, and it had the appearance of blood, but it was hard as a hailstone. No man had seen that she had let fall a tear, either before or after. Then she said that she might not pursue vengeance before they came back home, that is, Ragnar or his sons. And you shall be here until then. I shall not hold off spurring on vengeance as if they'd been my own sons. Then they stayed there. And so it happened that Ivar and the brothers came home before Ragnar, and they were not home long before Oslog went to find her sons. Sigurd was then 3 winters old. He went with his mother. And then she came into a hall where the brothers were discussing. They received her well. Each asked the other for tidings, and they spoke first of the fall of Rognvald, her son, and of the circumstances, and how it had happened. But that she did not seem grave to her, and she said, My sons leave me by myself, to gaze over the sea mews. You do not travel from house to house begging. Rognvald took up the shield, red with men's blood. Youngest of all my sons, he came to Odin. And I cannot see, she said, that he could have lived to a great honor. That they asked her what tidings she had. She answered, The fall of Eric and Agnar, your brothers, my stepsons. I think that out of all men, they had the best courage. And it will not be odd if you cannot bear such an injury, but take great vengeance. I will be of great assistance to you in all of this, so that this deed may be more than commonly avenged. Then Ivar said, This is true. I will never come back to Svitjolf eagerly to battle with King Einstein, and the pagan sacrificial magic which is there. She pressed him greatly, but Ivar spoke for all of them, and refused outright to make the journey. And then she spoke this verse. You would not be unavenged of your brothers 1 season later, if you had died first. I would prefer that Eric and Agnar had lived in your stead, though as sons they were not born to me. It is not certain, Ivar said, whether the matter will stand differently, even if you speak one verse after another. However, do you know clearly what strongholds there are before us? I do not know for certain, she said. However, what can you say of the difficulties there might be? Ivar said there had been a great pagan sacrificial magic, and he said that no man has ever heard of its like. And when the king is both powerful and ill-natured, what does he have the most faith in when making sacrifices?